In Vincennes, Indiana, Monday morning, January 6, 1920, there was a midnight raid by the Secret Service and local police that landed 10 alleged communists in jail. Armed with federal warrants, government agent J.V. Bell, chief of police Martin, and 3 other officers swooped down upon homes of members of communist organizations, captured the members together with their charter and much literature appealing to radicalism, including the overthrow of the U.S. government. Defendants, all whom are foreign-born and only one whom has taken out naturalization papers, were taken to Terre Haute, where they will be examined, and if the evidence is found sufficient, they will be turned over to the Department of Labor for deportation. Incidents in connection with the arrest of the men, history of the communist movement here and throughout the United States. The nationwide government movement against the Red Revolutionists struck Vincennes all in a heap Sunday morning, resulting in the arrest of 11 men, 10 of whom were sent to Terre Haute on the evening train, one being released. For more than 2 months, Chief Martin of the local police department had been on a trail of the Red organization through sources of their own. However, the national government's Department of Justice had trailed the snake to Vincennes, and Saturday night at 10 o'clock, the government stepped into the headquarters of the local police in the person of J.V. Bell, of Galveston, Texas. Sleuth, but in reality a representative direct from the headquarters of the Department of Justice at Indianapolis. Mr. Bell pulled out his book and set out a list of names. "I want these men, every one of them. I want them tonight," he said to the chief, and the names he gave here as follows: Gustav Pesch, of 104 Jefferson Avenue, Vincennes; Joseph Burkhart, 1023 North 4th Street; Johann A. Jankowski, 608 Upper 11th Street; Mike Dera, 1024 North 4th Street; Carl Trotter, 1917 Park Street; William Nowaski, 108 West Swartzel Avenue; Frank Weiniger, 1818 Indiana Avenue; Alois Crewet, 813 North 13th Street; Albert Zabel, 104 Jefferson Avenue; Robert Kessler, 1112 North 1st Street; Paul Berger, 103 Rill Avenue. All of the defendants are foreign-born, and all are aliens with the exception of one Burkhart, who has taken out naturalization papers. About 8 of the 11 had signed alien papers during the war, 1 being Finlander, 2 being Prussians, and the remainder being Germans. They are all implicated in joining an organization known as the Communist Party, whose main object, according to evidence in possession of the government, is to overthrow the U.S. government. Taken in midnight raid, Chief of Police Martin started with the posse to visit the houses of the suspect. The police party consisted of Chief of Police Martin, Captain William Smith, and officers H.W. Williams and William Blunk of the local police departments of the United States, Officer J.V. Bell of Galveston, Texas. At every home they visited, a searching investigation was made. Every nook and cranny was searched, the inmates questioned, and a considerable amount of literature was found. An immense amount of confusion was created in the raid because the occupants of houses were so contentious, and the raid took practically all night. The utmost secrecy was exercised and was deemed necessary in order to make a raid a complete success. The commercial hardly cooperated in this respect, regardless of the effect that at least 5 of the 11 men were in jail at the time the Sunday commercial went to press. The police feared that already too much publicity had been given to the newspapers, for the press dispatches from Indianapolis and Chicago had for 2 days connected Vincennes with the general scheme as a mass. But 6 o'clock Sunday morning, the work was finished. 11 of the alleged Reds were placed in jail, and the police went to bed to get some rest. Results of the night's work was highly satisfactory to the officers and resulted in the capture of 11 alien prisoners. President of the local Red organization, securing of the Red organizations, the charter of the local Red organizations, number 25 for Indiana, documents of the Communist Party containing platform of doctrine, circulars advocating raids on capital and property, membership cards, correspondence. Each man arrested had a membership card in his home. Only one woman was found to be a member. While the defendants were in jail Sunday awaiting the coming of the federal agents from Terre Haute to take them to the city for preliminary examinations, representatives of the commercial called at the jail and occurred interviews from several of them, including Joe Burkhart, who was secretary of the local communist organization, and William Nowaski is the only one of the 2 men who is a naturalized American citizen. Both were born in Germany, but both spoke English language well. The men told of their connections with the communist organization, their stories in the main being very similar, and other expressions from some of the other prisoners. indicated that they all had more or less than the same story to tell. Burckhardt, the professed secretary of the organization, stated that the first connection with the Communist Party was the first Sunday in November. He stated that he'd been a member of the local Socialist Party, but that the Socialists split up and he and a member of others, including the other 9 prisoners, met and decided to join what they called the Communist Party. He stated that they had several meetings and secured a charter, that he was selected as secretary of the local organization. He stated that they were in communications with general organizations at Chicago and secured literature and lodge materials from the Chicago headquarters. He stated that as soon as they secured some of the literature of the organization, he came to the conclusion that the organization was too radical to belong to without getting into trouble. And because of the fact he destroyed most of the literature and the books showing the collections from the other members, and that he struck his name off the list. Burckhardt was born in Germany and stated that he has been in his country since 1910 and has since taken out naturalization papers. Because of this fact, Burckhardt cannot be deported, but can be prosecuted under the state and national laws. William Nowaski, in response to the questions put to him by commercial representatives, stated that he was born in Westphalia, Germany, and that he made a trip to this country because he could not speak the language. He only remained about a year and returned to Germany. He stated, however, that it soon dawned upon him that he preferred the United States to Germany, and after a stay of 11 months in Germany, returned to this country, where he has since resided. Nowaski, who is a middle-aged man, has a wife, a Belgian wife, who has 2 children by a former husband. In mentioning his connection with the Communist Party, very similar to that of Burckhardt, stating that he had been member of the Socialist Party, which split up, and he went into the Communist Party. But that as soon as his wife saw some of the literature of the organization, she objected to his remaining in the organization or having anything to do with it. He stated that he had paid 1 month's dues in the organization of 40 cents. When informed that being an alien and a member of such a radical organization, he was likely to be deported back to Germany, he stated that he would not like to return to Germany as he liked this country much better, and expressed regret that men such as were at the head of the organization in this country should take advantage of men like him and draw them into radical organizations. He also stated that the local communist organization had been formed about the first Sunday in November. Robert Kessler, probably the youngest of the defendants, was visited at the jail by his young wife and brother-in-law during the afternoon, but their stay was short. Kessler insisted that he had done nothing wrong and seemed confident that he would be able to clear himself. Miss Kessler, however, was much disturbed over the developments of the day, and at the jail requested her husband to keep her informed while he was away. Later at the station, while waiting the arrival of the train to take the prisoners to Terre Haute, Miss Kessler informed her husband that if he had to be deported, that she was ready to go back with him. Just before taking the train, Kessler's handcuffs were temporarily removed from his wrist to permit of his signing some American National Bank checks for his wife. One of the defendants, on being asked why he had a dislike for this country, stated that he was pretty well satisfied with his country, but that his chief objection was that he was unable to get his beer and whiskey. It is stated that Carl Trotter, one of the defendants, was caught in the draft when the United States entered the war with Germany, and that in order to escape service to the U.S. Army, he went to Mexico and secured a position at his trade, that of digging coal, but that he had only been there a short time until agents from the German government took him in charge. He did not get released until friends in this city, at considerable expense, secured his release from Mexico. The long journey from Vincennes to Germany and Australia started at 6:30 Friday evening when the police patrol stopped at the county jail for 10 men who have indicated by their actions that they would rather live in those countries than America. Federal agent Roberts and Babbitt, working out of the Indianapolis office, came down from Terre Haute at 5:10 to help transport the men at the directions of Agent Bell, who conducted the raid Saturday night. Officers Guyver and Sodom, Captain Dryman, Chief Martin, Sheriff Harry C. Adams assisted in conducting the patrol safety on board the train. Handcuffed 2 by 2, the men marched out between the rows of officers. A score or more of women, boys, and children met the patrol wagon when it pulled up to the station. A northbound CNEI train several hours later was just pulling in, and the group thought it was going to take their men away. The only scene of hysteria characterizing the whole departing hour occurred then. One little woman with a knitted coat and cap lost entire control of herself. Recognizing Mr. Bell as the chief in charge, she threw herself before him, begging that she get her man back. "Look at these children," she cried. "We've got to have him." Mr. Bell quietly promised the women that they would hear from their men within a day or two. The 10 communists were rushed up the platform, leaving the little group of women and children huddled about the wagon. A boy came running up with a sack in his hand just as the train was pulling up, and a woman cried, "There goes Papa, take it to him quick." It was then that Miss Mike Deers took the leadership and charged them all to keep control of themselves. Calm, confident, and hard, she led them up the platform and into the station waiting room where the men had been taken. There occurred a scene for the post heart calm and quietly tragic, which the eyes of men are not often forced to observe. The little woman who gave way at the patrol wagon was the only one who continued to shed tears. Some were defiant, some exhibited the vacant stability of the Prussian, some were awed, perhaps some were fearful of where the means were to come with which to furnish food for the little mouths, and others laughed and made merry during the last minute. A handcuffed pair came up after the rest had been seated for some time. One of them looked around for a long time and said in a broken English, "I don't see my wife." Finally he sighted her and tugged his companion's arm to go over there. The officer had cleared a corner for them. The little folks perhaps did not quite grasp the significance of the occasion. One round-faced, light-haired little man that bespoke a Prussian birth sat emptily smiling with a little girl about 3 or 4 years old on his lap. Every once in a while he would hold his face down and say, "Yes, Papa," and a pair of little lips would press against the rough cheek. Perhaps the most openly defiant was Robert Kessler. He sat on the end of the bench with his American wife close by him all the time. He proclaimed that he would rather stay in this country, but if they didn't want him, he was ready to go. "That's me," he concluded in his broken talk. He took out a checkbook and wrote out a check, which he turned over to his wife. She said, "Now, Bob, I want you to write me just as soon as you get a chance. Let me know, because I am going to go with you if you go." Mike Dera, black-mustached and black whiskers, slouched in his seat and talked in a lower voice to his wife, and who's near him. She sent one of the children for some candy, and when he returned, ceremoniously showed it to the officer before handing it to her husband. Joe Burkhart, typical Prussian, had no woman folks with him. He is a single man, and his mother lives in Germany. But everybody shook his hand and gave him greetings. Burkhart also was the only one in the group who was an American citizen. When the train pulled in, the scene changed for the most part to one of gaiety. Most of the men had been provided with cigars and packages as soon as they had been seated in the last coach. Began to light up. The windows were open. Jokes passed back and forth between women in the platform and men in the train. A woman shouted, "You'll get plenty of beans and sauerkraut." Another said, "Drink all the beer you want." Miss Kessler yelled to her husband, "You won't have to work any more for a while, anyway. No more going down into the oh-ho." And the whistle blew, brakes creaked, and the train pulled out, giving at least part of the group what will probably be the last view of Vincennes, which someday they may decide was not so bad after all. Nowalski, one of the ringleaders, married a Belgian woman, a widow with 2 children. He was a loud-mouthed agitator and is a bad type of radical. He has been spotted a long time. Miss Nowalski was upset that this disgrace should come upon her, and at the train Sunday night she exploded. Some of the other wives of the radicals were said to have accused her of giving the thing away to the police. She and her 2 children sailed down the track to a group of laminating women. "You needn't accuse me of giving away. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't tell the police. You know I didn't. You don't like me because I am Belgian, and you say those things. I hope they will send you all back." One of the women in the group retorted that he, Nowalski, had caused all the trouble. Miss Nowalski shrieked, "I didn't know about it. I am for my government. I am for the United States. If I had known my husband was working against the government, I would have left him. You women are bad. You don't like me because I am Belgian woman." The spirit was bitter, and nothing would appease Miss Nowalski. Her children cried bitterly, and Miss Nowalski said she had no way to make a living now and did not know what she would do. The station waiting room was filled with citizens and travelers, many of whom did not know that the raid had taken place until they were told who the handcuffed men were. The sentiments expressed by those citizens were not charitable to the Red cause in America. Many seemed shocked to learn that there were that many men in the community who would plot to overthrow the government. Better shoot 'em and hang 'em. It's too good for them, were heard from several different sources. It was the general view that the incident would have the solitary effect both in arousing and citizens to the danger in the midst and to show the radicals themselves that the government does not tolerate anarchy. The personnel of defendants is as follows: Gustav Pesch, 104 Jefferson Avenue, President of the Communist Order number 25, single rooms with Albert Zobel. At this number, a Finlander is a miner and works in the Bruceville mine. Had 3 brothers in the German army. All meetings were held at this house, and Pesch was their head of the whole scheme for this city. Very radical. Joseph Burkhardt was secretary of the Communist Order number 25. Single, lived at 1023 North 4th Street, worked at Bruceville Mine, German, was very radical, and talked as though he was greatly outraged. Johann A. Jankowski, 608 Upper 11th Street, Prussian, was married to an American girl not long ago. Mike Dira, 1024 North 4th Street, miner, worked in Indian Creek Mine, married, had 2 brothers in German Army. Carl Trotter, 1917 Park Street, miner, worked in Indian Creek Mine, married, had 6 brothers in the German Army. William Nowoski, 108 West Swartzel Avenue, miner, worked in the Indian Creek Mine, is a violent radical and very talkative. Married a Belgian woman a few months ago. Robert Kessler, 1112 North 1st Street, miner, worked in the Bruceville Mine, aged about 31 years, married German. Frank Weiniger, 1818 Indiana Avenue, worked in Bruceville Mine. Lois Crewitt, 813 North 13th Street, worked in the Bruceville Mine, German. Albert Zobel, 104 Jefferson Avenue, worked in the Bruceville Mine. It was at this house that all of the meetings were held for the President George Pesch, boarded at the place, German. Paul Berger, 103 Real Avenue, Coal Mines, worked at the Bruceville Mines, married, and has 2 children, German. Berger was released Sunday afternoon because he quit the organization as soon as he found out what it meant. He married a German woman, came here in 1902, went back to Germany to get the women, and married her. He returned in 1913 because he liked his country so well. Berger stated the red dues were 40 cents a month and that he only paid 1 month, November 1st. Berger was at the police headquarters most of the afternoon Sunday. He denied any sympathy with the Reds. He said his wife begged him not to have anything to do with it. He speaks fair English and said he proved by his book of dues that he only paid 1 month and quit them, and told them he would not belong to it because he didn't believe in it. I would sooner die than go back, he declared excitedly, and so would my wife. We have done no wrong and believe in this fine country. He said he knew he was in bad company, but refused all invitations to their meetings, and Mr. Bell satisfied himself that this was true and let him go. Berger was in poor health. Up to date, the communist organization is about paralyzed. There are several other suspects, however, who will be taken in later. The 10 men under arrest are the active workers, and were trying to start a big organization here in Vincennes. They made poor progress. There was only 11 members found. They distributed socially their circulars all over the workmen's neighborhood, every man with a foreigner, only one being naturalization. And it is this class of wretches who hope to overthrow this enlightened government and substantiate the grab-all theatric communist scheme in place of it. During the past 3 days, the government has made a big cleanup of all over the country. As many as 4,500 persons were arrested. At least 2,300 of these are dead cinches for deportation. Arrest at Newark, New Jersey, uncovered a plot for the Soviet Union to be organized in the United States to fight the government. These plans were for a revolution backed by a military organization. A large number of rifles, bombs, bomb-making materials were seized in Newark, New Jersey. The government announced evidence was also found out there had been planned to actual formation of a military organization among the Reds, which was to center in New York. The 300 persons arrested in Newark was characterized as the most dangerous sort by the department. Reports from 45 cities showed that more than 4,400 had been arrested thus far, as follows: 800 in New York, 500 Detroit, 221 Chicago, 410 Jersey City, 320 Newark, 400 Philadelphia, 180 in Rockford, Illinois, 250 in Buffalo, 98 in Cleveland, 75 in Trenton, 45 Kansas City, Kansas, 60 in Wilkesboro, 40 in Patterson, 35 Baltimore, 20 in St. Louis, 20 in Oakland, California, 20 in Pittsburgh, 20 in Portland, Oregon, 20 in Louisville, 17 in Minneapolis, 10 in Des Moines, 20 in Youngstown, Ohio, 15 in St. Paul, 9 in Denver, 9 in Omaha, 9 in Toledo, 5 in Racine, Wisconsin, 6 in East St. Louis, 843 in New England, a total of 4,483. All American citizens who were arrested will be turned over to the state authorities for prosecution under state laws for criminal sedition, it was announced. There were two parties in the Red Movement. One was a Communist Party and a Communist Labor Party. They had literature. Both of these parties conducted effective propaganda work through newspapers, books, pamphlets, and other methods. The Communist paper, Alohi, had 25 newspapers printed in several languages, actively supporting its cause. This number was being increased weekly by papers, which were formerly socialist, organs going over to its support. The alien editors of most of these papers were taken by the Department of Justice agents in the raids. The Attorney General ordered the raids on the members of the Communist and Communist Labor parties after he had obtained evidence that showed that these two organizations taught and advocated the overthrow by force and violence of the government of the United States. The arrests were made on warrants issued by the Immigration Bureau and the Department of Labor. The Communist Party and the Communist Labor Party had the same aims and purpose in that both support the manifesto of the Third International held at Moscow from March 2nd to March 6, 1919. The difference between these two parties is practically only that of leadership. Commercial has possession certain circulars of the Vincennes organizations circulated wherever they could. They had a regular party or organizations, and officers had charged 40 cents a month dues. In one of these circulars, a proclamation of the Communist Party against government action at Gary to maintain law and order calls the national government the capitalist state and a dictatorship which should be overthrown and replaced by a dictatorship of the workers. And other circular warns the workers to take charge of the shops, the factories, the stores, the mills, and the mine, and the farms, for the use of the workers, and calls capitalism the Khazars and kings of industry, and that in Russia the workers have shown the way, etc. Urges the Soviet government, urges organizations of the Communist Party shop branch, for which committee will furnish all the papers and pamphlets necessary to teach how the overthrow must come. Let it come now, they cry. The Vincennes Committee, and we blush with shame to admit it was arrested Sunday and then taken away. It is the doctrine of Lenin and Trotsky, who are aiming to control the country like Russia. Their strongest work started in New York and Chicago. Wake up, citizen. This movement was immediately started through the force of Lenin and Trotsky shortly after Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, November 1918, when the armistice was signed. The Manifesto of the Third International, which is signed by Lenin and Trotsky, among others, urges the overthrow of the government of the United States by force and violence. Communist Party and the Communist Labor represent the results of the propaganda in this country to bring into one organization all persons who seek to overthrow the present government of the United States. Attorney General Palmer announces the evidence in the way of the documentary proof in his possession show that the Communist Party was outgrowth of the left wing of the Socialist Party of America, and the Communist Party is an integral part. First Congress of the Communist International directly advocated the overthrow of all the governments of the world by force and violence through its advocation of mass action. What the Communist Party of America in its manifesto and program officially adopted at its convention in Chicago held September 1st, 1919, vacated the overthrow of the government of the United States by force and violence, that each and every member of the Communist Party of the American pledges himself knowingly to the tactics and the principles of the Communist Party of America and to the tactics and important principles indicated in the manifesto of the Communist International, that the Communist Party of the American, through the propaganda being actively carried on at the present time, is advocating the overthrow of the government of the United States by force and violence. The same conclusion also applies to the Communist Labor Party. How the local movement started. Literature of Soviet government was found here in Vincennes early in November. Communist literature then appeared. The defiant spirit was shown by some of the propagandists who sent by mail to the editor of the commercial some communist literature in retort to the editorial printed by us entitled Ship 'em or Shoot 'em. Chief Martin's men ran down some of the printed material too and turned it in. The distributor was cautiously slipped around the Union Depot and dropped his documents on the seats in the waiting room. Chief Martin and the editor of the commercial started investigations, and in a few days the men were located. North 4th Street, Jefferson Avenue, the identical points. The matter was placed before District Attorney Slack, who advised care in getting evidence. Chief Martin secured a lot of startling evidence. The movement seemed to have its adherents, but not many. Thank goodness Chief Martin kept in touch with the rotten thing night and day. Knew all about the movements, their literature, their cards, and their memberships. Evidence was accumulated at headquarters in the Department of Justice, too. At Saturday night, it was easy. The names, the house numbers, the leaders were all spotted, and even the charter secured.